Hey posse, are you ready to bust another wine myth? We're going to bust the myth, old wine is better wine. Have you ever heard anyone say aged wine is better than young wine? Old wine is good wine, or wine gets better with age? Well, we're going to take this myth, no matter how it's said, and we're going to bust it. In 1974, I purchased a small half bottle of Asti. That's a sparkling wine. My plan was to save it. I found out later that keeping your wine for an extended period of time is called laying down your wine. I was going to save it for 10 or 15 years and open it on a special occasion. I figured I'd know when that time was right. I was going to save it because, after all, everybody knows old wine is better. For those of you who are trying to do the math on my age, I was 4 years old when I bought that bottle of wine. When it comes to this myth, what we're going to do is look at 4 different things. Number 1, what's the myth? Number 2, where did it come from? Or how did it get started? Number 3, what are the facts? And number 4, it's going to be my summary or recommendation at the end. Now keep in mind, if at any time you like what you hear, click like, subscribe, and hit the little bell so you'll be notified when there's a new post. Number 1, the myth. Okay, we already know what the myth is. Number 2, how did it get started? Now, this is the Cliff Notes. On the Cliff Notes, this is a real rough overview. The myth got started 400 to 500 years ago, long before the US was ever around, when producers, particularly in France and Germany, and Italy, were producing more wines than could be drunk in a year. Now keep in mind, back then, most wine was being drunk daily because people learned that many were getting sick from bad water. Water purification had not been invented at that point. Now, unless you went to your communities or your village's well, or had a well or a stream on your property, wine was safer to drink than water. For the winemakers, part of the solution was to make the wine available to everybody. Still, they were outproducing what the consumers could consume. So, out of necessity, they started laying their wine down. Now, much to their surprise, they found that some older wines, mostly reds, but also some whites, being made from certain grapes actually tasted better than younger wines. These older wines developed a completely different taste profile as they evolved in controlled environments like caves, cellars, and that sort of thing over the years. Initially, there was less of this wine. It tasted better than everyday table wine. It was exclusive, cost more, and those who could afford it bought more of it. This is the way the myth got started. When wine consumption was only a fraction of what it is today, a small segment of European society began drinking more of these wines, which were 5, 10, 15 years old and older. Now you may be saying at this point, wait a minute, Pierre, it sounds like you're saying the old wine is better wine. Yeah, actually it sort of does, doesn't it? But hold on. This brings us to number 3, the facts. But first, is this information giving you a good overview? If it is, write new wine in the comments below. Okay, the facts. We're going to look at raw numbers and percentages. So today, even though there's very little worry about the safety of our water supply, there has been a massive increase in the number of wine consumers. For centuries, France and Italy were the world's largest consumers of wine. In recent years, the United States has surpassed both France and Italy in wine consumption, and Germany, who was traditionally a beer country, has transitioned to wine consumption. The Germans now drink over 60% more wine than beer. And on top of that, Currently, China is the #5 consumer of wine and is consuming more total alcohol than the top 3 countries combined. As China's thirst for wine increases, it's anticipated that in a few short years they will become the #1 consumer of wine in the world. Very simply, wine production increased to stay ahead of demand, but it hasn't really kept up. However, the type of wines being produced has changed and changed dramatically. Now, while the number of people and the amount of wines have increased exponentially, there's a very small percentage of the wine being produced that ages well. I mean, really well. Today, producers are intentionally making wine to be drunk sooner than later. Typically, red wines that have a high tannin level and solid acidity are the primary wines you want to age. Now, over 90% of red wines are made for drinking within 5 to 8 years of their release. You'll see right here, this is the vintage date. Listen to this. Currently, there are trends, especially with reds, for winemakers to craft young, fresh, big, flavorful, fruit-forward wines to drink immediately rather than to age. The largest segment of wine lovers are looking for a taste profile like this. A few red wines will age gracefully. There is also a small number of white wines that will benefit from aging, such as Rieslings. They're good for decades. Semillons, they don't hit their strides for about 6 to 7 years, and there's a small number of Chardonnays. But in general, these are intended to be drunk young as well. Today, white wines are ready for consumption when they leave the winery. They've already been aged in the barrel, tank, or been in the bottle for 18 months. You should drink them within 1 to 3 years of the vintage date on the bottle. Like you'll see here. Now, in the main scheme of things, intentionally, there is a relatively small number and percentage of wines being produced today that are age-worthy. Very few wines are meant to be drunk in the twilight years. The vast majority of wines are being made to be ready to drink on release and will not benefit from aging. Over 95% of all wines are intended to be drunk within 12 to 24 months. Now, here's the key to the whole old wine thing. Unless you know what you're doing and exactly what you're looking for, as a general rule, if you're buying your wine through a volume retail outlet like a supermarket, big box store, or a volume online retailer, it's probably best to drink it in its youth. Now, this even includes most wines with scores of 90 points or better. When I bought that Asti Spumante in 1974, at the time, I knew nothing about wine except it got better with age. Boy, was I ever wrong. That wine tasted like vinegar when I opened it 12 years later. Actually, I wish I had seen this video back then. Well, there you have it. We just busted the old wine is better than young wine myth. If you keep it up and keep watching, you'll become one of my official wine myth busters. Learn more about that in the description. Hang tight, I still owe you a solution to all this and that summary and recommendation. But first, hey, thanks so much for investing the time to watch this video. If you got something out of it, let me know in the comments below. Also, hit subscribe and the little bell to be notified when I post new videos every single week. And share this video if it was helpful to you. I'd really appreciate it. All right, are you ready for my solution, my summary, and the recommendation? Actually, there are 2 parts to this. First, if you've ever kept an unopened bottle of wine in the pantry for years, waiting for it to increase in quality and value, frankly, like me, you're wasting your time. Now, my summary and recommendation, does wine get better with age? The answer is actually no. And yes. All wines produced today will not get better with time. They will deteriorate, get worse. It's estimated that less than 1% of the worldwide wine consumers store their wine properly. These are going to be the very best high quality wines. You rarely find these in grocery stores or big box stores. It's estimated that over 99% of us do not have proper wine storage. Now, if you want to get a better handle on how to best store your wine, you might want to check out my video, The 6 Elements of Storage. There are helpful tips there for everybody. Now, in the main scheme of things, there is a minuscule number of wines that will age well if they're stored properly. This is what you need to do if you want to lay down your wine for 10 years or longer. You need to buy or build a wine storage unit, a wine storage area, or a wine cellar. If you don't, your wine will go bad. Your old wine will not be better than your young wine. Well, there you have it. You're on the road to becoming an official Asti Wine Mythbuster. Thanks again for being with me. Make sure you watch my other videos about wine storage and busting other myths. Remember to hit like and subscribe if you got something out of this video. Until next time, cheers.